Welcome back to our channel, where we dive into the mysterious, the terrifying, and the utterly inexplicable. Today, we have a special treat for you, a trilogy of true stories that explore what it means to be alone in the dark. From haunted shortcuts through the woods to a caver's worst nightmare to a night shift that turns into a haunting ordeal, these stories will make you question the safety of the darkness. Grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and let's dive into these spine-chilling tales. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on our dose of the creepy and unexplained. Now, let's begin. Story 1: The Shortcut. My name is Alex, and I've always hated the narrow path through the woods that connects my house to my best friend Tim's. It's not that I'm afraid of the dark or anything. It's just that the woods have always given me the creeps, especially at night. But one evening I didn't have much of a choice. Tim and I had lost track of time while playing video games, and before I knew it, it was already dark outside. Daylight saving time had just kicked in, and I'd forgotten how quickly the sun sets. I didn't have my bike, my parents weren't home, and I had a school project due the next day that I hadn't even started on. "Man, I really need to get going," I said, glancing nervously at the window. "You could always take the shortcut through the woods," Tim suggested, handing me a flashlight. I hesitated. "I don't know, man, those woods are creepy." "It's a 3-minute walk, Alex. What's the worst that could happen?" Tim chuckled. I sighed. "All right, fine." Taking the flashlight, I stepped out into the chilly night air. The beam of light cut through the darkness as I made my way to the entrance of the narrow path. Taking a deep breath, I stepped onto the trail. That's when I heard it, a sound that was neither animal nor machine, a low, guttural hum that seemed to vibrate the very air around me. I hesitated, my hand gripping the flashlight Tim had lent me. The sound was coming from the direction of my house, but it was distant, as if carried by the wind. I took a deep breath and started walking, my flashlight beam dancing over the ground in front of me. The sound remained constant, a haunting backdrop to the rustling leaves and snapping twigs underfoot. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. By the time I reached the halfway point, the sound had changed. It was louder now, more insistent, as if it was moving closer. My skin prickled with fear. I had the unsettling feeling that whatever was making that noise was aware of me, maybe even following me. In a moment of sheer panic, I broke into a run. I needed to get out of the woods and away from this sound that seemed to be on my heels. As I pushed through branches and jumped over roots and rocks, my eyes narrowed on my porch light I could see in the distance. But as I stared as salvation, I tripped over a tree root, stumbling and dropping the flashlight. It flickered and went out. I hit the ground hard, my breath knocked out of me. The sound was deafening now, filling the air, vibrating through the ground and into my bones. I curled up into a ball, my eyes squeezed shut, waiting for whatever horror awaited me. Then, cutting through the noise, I heard something else. My dad's voice calling my name. "Jake, Jake, is that you?" I opened my eyes just in time to see my dad burst through the underbrush, his own flashlight illuminating the area. "What the hell are you doing here? Are you okay?" I scrambled to my feet, my body shaking. "Dad, did you hear that sound?" He looked puzzled. "What sound?" "I was pulling into the driveway when I saw a light in the woods. I thought it might be you." I quickly explained what had happened as we made our way back to the house. My dad listened intently but didn't say much. When we reached the safety of our backyard, he finally spoke. "I don't know what that was, but I don't think you should be taking that shortcut anymore, especially not at night." As we walked into the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were leaving something behind in those woods, something that had been watching me, waiting for me. I knew I would never take that shortcut again. And the sound that I had heard, the sound that still haunts my dreams, remains a mystery to this day. Story 2: The Cave. In the heart of Kentucky lies Mammoth Cave National Park, a sprawling underground wonderland that draws tourists and explorers from around the world. Yet not far from this natural marvel is another cave that holds a darker legacy: Sand Cave. Floyd, a seasoned caver, knew the area well. Mammoth Cave was already a popular attraction in the 1920s, and Floyd had a vision: find a new entrance or passage to the cave system that would bypass the existing routes. and he could turn it into a lucrative tourist attraction. With dreams of financial security and perhaps even fame, Floyd was driven by more than just the thrill of exploration. Armed with just a kerosene lamp, Floyd began his journey into the dark sand cave. The beginning of the trip was typical. However, as Floyd squeezed through a tight crawlway in the cave, a loose rock shifted, pinning his leg in a position he couldn't escape from. He was 55 feet underground, wedged in a passage just barely larger than his body. He struggled, but the rock wouldn't budge. Floyd was trapped. During the first few days, Floyd clung to hope. His shouts echoed through the dark limestone tunnels. Finally, a search party located him. News of his perilous situation reached the surface, and rescue attempts began. But the narrowness of the cave made it almost impossible for rescuers to reach him without endangering his life further. Days turned into nights, and nights back into days. His lamp soon flickered out, plunging him into total darkness. Imagine being confined in a space so narrow you can't turn your head, unable to see anything, unable to move, and knowing that a world is bustling just above you but helplessly out of reach. As Floyd lay there, the darkness seemed to grow thicker, almost tangible. The cave was unyielding, indifferent to his increasing desperation. It was said that he could hear the faint digging and drilling efforts to save him, a cruel reminder of his entrapment. After 14 days of this harrowing ordeal, help never arrived in time. Floyd passed away alone in the darkness, a victim of the very cave he'd hoped would be his legacy. His story became a national sensation, covered extensively by the media and even inspiring folk songs and plays. The cave was eventually turned into a tourist attraction, but not in the way Floyd had ever imagined, and so Floyd remains a haunting cautionary tale, a vivid reminder that sometimes the pursuit of adventure and discovery can lead us into the unforgiving grasp of the unknown. In the case of Floyd, that unknown was a dark, narrow cave that would become his eternal resting place, leaving us all with the chilling reality of what it truly means to be alone in the dark. Story 3: Night Shift Terror. Paul had always been a night owl, so when the opportunity arose for a graveyard shift as a security guard at the old Thompson warehouse, he was more than happy to take it. The warehouse was a sprawling, century-old building that had been everything from a textile factory to a storage facility for rare antiques. It was the kind of place that had history, and with history came stories that Paul never took seriously. That is, until he had to spend a night alone there. Normally, Paul worked the night shift with Sarah, a fellow security guard. However, Sarah had called in sick, and they couldn't find anyone to cover for her. "Looks like you're on your own tonight," the shift manager had told him. "Just keep an eye on the cameras and do your rounds. You'll be fine." Paul settled into the small security office filled with monitors displaying various angles of the warehouse. The first few hours were uneventful. He did his rounds, checked the cameras, and even managed to catch up on some reading. But around 2:30 a.m. he started hearing it, footsteps echoing through the empty halls, followed by faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Feeling a mix of dread and obligation, Paul grabbed his flashlight and ventured out to investigate. He checked every corner, every room, and found nothing. The footsteps and whispers had stopped, but the unsettling feeling remained. Paul wasn't a believer in the supernatural, so he figured there must be a logical explanation for the shadowy figure he saw on the camera. Maybe the cameras were malfunctioning, or some trick of the light was causing the shadow. He shook off the eerie feeling and continued to monitor the screens. However, a few minutes later he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The shadowy figure was moving from room to room, appearing on different cameras. It started far away from the security room, but minute by minute Paul saw it pass through cameras, following a path that led directly to where he was. The figure moved down the hall and stopped in a blind spot between the hallway camera and the camera pointed at the door of the security room. Paul's heart pounded in his chest. He remembered the silent alarm trigger on his desk that would immediately alert the authorities. With trembling hands, he pressed it. While waiting for the police, Paul could feel the presence of something just outside the door. An eerie tension filled the room, as if both he and the figure were waiting for the other to make the final move. Paul stared at the door, his mind pleading for whatever it was to go away. The door wasn't locked, and he was only armed with pepper spray. Time seemed to stretch on forever until he finally heard the voices of police officers calling out from down the hall. They helped him clear the area, but found nothing. Relieved yet shaken, Paul spent the rest of the night in the well-lit lobby, waiting for his shift to end. When the next shift arrived at 6 a.m., Paul recounted his terrifying experience. Together, they reviewed the footage and were shocked to see the figure following Paul during his 2:30 a.m. route and the almost confrontation that followed. When the police arrived, they noticed the shadowy figure retreating from the hallway leading to the security room, eventually disappearing into one of the darker areas of the building. Paul's manager reviewed the footage and immediately implemented a new protocol requiring a mandatory 2-person shift for overnights. Paul still works at the warehouse, but the experience left him deeply unsettled. The shadowy figure was never identified, and the footage remains a chilling reminder that sometimes, even in places we think we know, we are not alone. Thank you for sticking with us through these spine-chilling tales of being alone in the dark. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for: which of these stories is actually true? If you guessed the cave, you are correct. Floyd Collins was a caver who became nationally famous in the United States for his entrapment in Sand Cave, Kentucky, in 1925. Initially, people were able to communicate with Floyd and even pass food and water to him. However, a rockfall in the cave tightened the opening even further, making it virtually impossible for rescuers to get Floyd out without endangering his life more. The rescuers tried a variety of methods to save him, including digging and drilling, but all attempts were unsuccessful due to the complexity and instability of the cave's structure. Tragically, Floyd Collins died in the cave after being trapped for about 2 weeks. His cause of death was likely a combination of hypothermia, starvation, and exhaustion. After his death, efforts were made to recover his body, but these were initially unsuccessful due to the dangerous conditions in the cave. Eventually, Floyd's body was recovered 2 months later and was buried initially on the family property. However, his remains were later exhumed and displayed in a glass-topped casket in Crystal Cave, another cave that Floyd had discovered as a tourist attraction. In 1989, his body was finally reburied in the Mammoth Cave Baptist Church Cemetery, putting an end to the macabre chapter of displaying his remains. Floyd's story became a cautionary tale about the perils of cave exploration, but also sparked interest and reforms in cave rescue techniques. His ordeal was widely covered in the media at the time, and it has been the subject of books, songs, and plays over the years. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the unknown. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that like button and share it with fellow mystery seekers. And remember, in every trio of tales at 2 tricks, 1 treat. 2 will deceive, but 1 always speaks the truth. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and always stay curious.